There's a moment, and maybe you've lived it, where someone says something cruel to you, something dismissive, something that cuts right through you, and instead of crumbling, instead of spiraling for days the way you always have, you feel nothing. Not numbness, not suppression. Just a quiet, clear space where the wound used to land, and it scares you. It scares you because you don't recognize yourself. Because your whole life you've been the one who cares too much, who replays conversations at 2 a.m., who carries other people's moods in your chest like stones, and suddenly, without warning, something has shifted. The grip is loosening. And part of you wonders, am I becoming cold? Am I losing something human in me? No. What's happening to you has a name. Carl Jung described it over a century ago, and when you understand it, truly understand it, you'll realize that this detachment you're starting to feel isn't the death of your empathy. It's the beginning of your freedom. But here's what no one tells you. Real detachment, the kind Jung actually wrote about, doesn't look like indifference. It doesn't look like walking away with sunglasses on while everything explodes behind you. That's ego. That's performance. True detachment is something far stranger, far quieter, and far more powerful. It's the moment your unconscious stops confusing someone else's chaos for your own identity. And once that wire is cut, everything changes. How you love, how you argue, how you stand in a room, even how you breathe. Today we're going to walk through what Jung actually meant by psychological detachment. Not the Instagram version, not the avoided version, but the real process that happens when the psyche begins to withdraw its projections and reclaim its own energy. And if you've been feeling that strange shift lately, that unsettling sense that things that used to destroy you simply don't anymore, stay with me. Because what you're going through might be the most important transformation of your life. Let's start where it really begins. Not with other people, but with the invisible threads you've been sending out into the world since you were a child. Jung called them projections, and once you see them, once you truly understand what they are, you will never experience a relationship the same way again. A projection is when you take something that lives inside you, an emotion, a fear, a wound, an unmet need, and without realizing it, you place it onto another person. You don't do this on purpose. Your conscious mind doesn't even know it's happening, but your unconscious is working constantly, attaching pieces of your inner world onto the people around you. Think about it. Have you ever met someone and felt an instant magnetic pull toward them? Not just attraction, but something deeper, something almost fated. You look at them and you feel like they hold something you've been missing. They seem to carry a warmth, a strength, a certainty that you desperately want, and so you lean in. You attach. You begin to orbit them. Or the opposite. Have you ever met someone and felt an immediate, irrational dislike? Something about them bothers you. Their confidence feels like arrogance. Their quietness feels like judgment. Their success feels like a personal insult, and you can't explain why. They haven't done anything to you, but something inside you reacts. In both cases, you are not seeing the other person. You are seeing yourself, the parts of yourself that you have not yet owned, not yet integrated, not yet brought into the light. Jung said that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And he meant that literally. The people who trigger you the most are not your enemies. They are your mirrors. Now here is why this matters for detachment. When you are full of projections, you cannot detach from anyone. It's impossible. Because you haven't just connected with them. You've wired parts of your own psyche into them. Leaving them feels like losing yourself. Setting a boundary feels like cutting off your own arm. Saying no to them feels like saying no to something vital, something you need to survive. This is why so many people stay in relationships that drain them, not because they are weak, not because they don't see the damage, but because they have unconsciously distributed pieces of their soul across other people, and pulling away feels like death. Not physical death, but psychic death. The ego screams that without this person, you are nothing. That without their approval, their presence, their validation, you will collapse. But that's the projection talking, not you. Real detachment begins the moment you start pulling those threads back, one by one, slowly, not with anger, not with revenge, not with some dramatic declaration of independence, but with a quiet, almost sacred act of recognition. You look at the other person and you say, silently to yourself, what I've been seeking in you has been inside me all along, and it's time I took it back. That is the first door, and walking through it changes everything. Let's go deeper, because projection is only the beginning. The next layer is something Jung explored with extraordinary depth, and it's the reason detachment feels so terrifying even when you know it's right. Jung called it participation mystique. It's a term he borrowed from the anthropologist Levi Bruhl, and it describes a state of psychological merging where the boundary between you and another person dissolves. You stop knowing where you end and they begin. This sounds dramatic, but it's actually extremely common. Think of the relationship where you absorb the other person's mood without thinking. They walked in angry, and within minutes you were angry too. Not because anything happened to you, but because their emotional field overtook yours. Or the friendship where you slowly, over months, began to lose your own opinions. You started agreeing with everything they said. You adopted their taste, their language, their worldview. Not because you were convinced, but because merging was easier than standing apart. Or the family dynamic where one person's anxiety became everyone's anxiety. Where one person's crisis became the entire household's identity. Where you couldn't feel peace because someone else in the house wasn't at peace, and somehow, without anyone deciding it, their inner state became the weather for everyone. That is participation mystique. It's the oldest form of psychological bonding, and it exists because at some point in our development, it served us. As children, we needed to merge with our caregivers. We needed to read their moods, mirror their emotions, sync with their rhythms, because our survival depended on it. But here is the problem. Many of us never outgrew that merging. We carried it forward into adult relationships, into friendships, into work dynamics, into every interaction where we unconsciously handed our emotional compass to someone else and said, "You decide how I feel today." And so when you begin to detach, when that merging starts to dissolve, it doesn't feel like freedom at first. It feels like floating, like the ground has disappeared, because for so long your sense of self was anchored in other people. You knew who you were based on how they responded to you. You measured your worth by their attention. You calibrated your emotions by their approval. And now, suddenly, that mirror is gone. You are standing alone in a room with yourself, and you don't quite know who is staring back. This is the part that scares people. Not the detachment itself, but the emptiness that follows. The silence, the realization that underneath all those attachments, all those projections, all that merging, there is a self you have never actually met. But Jung would tell you this, that emptiness is not a void, it is a space. A fertile, necessary, sacred space where the true self can finally begin to grow. Don't run from it. Don't fill it with the next person, the next distraction, the next attachment. Sit in it. Let it breathe. Because what comes next is something most people never reach. This brings us to something Jung considered one of the most critical and misunderstood experiences in human psychology. He called it the withdrawal of projections. And it is, in his framework, one of the most powerful acts a human being can perform. Imagine you've spent years, maybe decades, carrying an image of someone in your mind. Maybe it's a parent, maybe it's an ex, maybe it's a friend, a mentor, someone you admire deeply. And attached to that image are feelings. Love, resentment, longing, anger, devotion. These feelings are real. They live in your body, they shape your decisions. They echo in every new relationship you enter. But here is what Jung would ask you. Are those feelings actually about the other person, or are they about the image you created? Because there is a difference, a vast difference. The person is real. They exist. They have their own life, their own complexity, their own shadow. But the image you carry of them, that's yours. You built it from your needs, your wounds, your hopes, your fears. You projected onto them the mother you wanted, the father you never had, the partner who would finally make you feel whole. And then you related not to the person, but to the projection. This is why breakups can feel like dying. You're not just losing a person, you're losing the version of yourself that you projected onto them. The part of you that said, I am lovable because they love me. The part that said, I am safe because they are here. The part that said, I know who I am because of how they see me. When that projection collapses, your identity shakes. And most people, terrified by this shaking, immediately reach for the next person to project onto. The cycle continues. New face, same dynamic. New name, same wound. But detachment, real detachment, means you stop. You let the projection fall. You feel the shaking, and instead of running, you ask, who am I without this image? Who am I when no one is holding me together? That question is not a crisis. It is an initiation. Now, there is a specific part of this process that Jung wrote about with great care, and it has to do with why detachment can feel almost physically painful, why it can show up in your body as tightness in your chest, as nausea, as a heaviness in your limbs that you cannot explain through any rational cause. Jung understood that the psyche and the body are not separate. They are one system. When you carry a projection for years, it doesn't just live in your thoughts. It embeds itself in your nervous system. It becomes a pattern of tension, a habitual brace against a specific kind of pain. Your body learns to hold the shape of the attachment. So when you begin to withdraw that projection, when you start to pull your energy back from someone who has been carrying a piece of your psyche for years, your body resists. Not because detachment is wrong, but because your body doesn't know the difference between real danger and psychic reorganization. All it knows is that something familiar is being taken away, and the familiar, even when it is painful, feels safe. This is why people go back. This is why people pick up the phone at midnight. This is why people say, I know this is bad for me, and then walk right back into it. The body remembers the attachment before the mind can override it. The nervous system craves the pattern even when the soul is begging to be free. And so detachment is not just a mental decision. It is a somatic process. It lives in your muscles, your breath, your gut. Jung would not have used modern terms like nervous system regulation, but he understood intuitively what we now confirm through neuroscience, that healing happens in the body as much as in the mind, and that true detachment requires patience with your own physical resistance. So be gentle with yourself when the pull comes, when your hand reaches for the phone, when your chest tightens at the thought of them. You are not failing, you are rewiring, and that takes time. Let's talk about something that most people get dangerously wrong when they attempt to detach, and this is perhaps the most important distinction in everything we'll cover today. There are two kinds of detachment. One heals you, the other destroys you, and they look almost identical from the outside. The first kind is what Jung would recognize as conscious detachment. It comes from awareness, from a deep, honest reckoning with your own patterns. You look at the attachment, you see the projection, you feel the pain, and then, with full consciousness, you choose to let go. Not because you hate the other person, not because you want to punish them, but because you recognize that what you were seeking in them is something you must find within yourself. This kind of detachment is warm, it's alive, it carries grief, yes, but also clarity. You can look at the person you're releasing and feel genuine tenderness for them, even as you walk away. You can honor what the relationship taught you. You can hold gratitude and goodbye in the same breath. The second kind is what we might call unconscious detachment, and this is the dangerous one. It looks strength. It feels like strength. It feels like power. But it is actually the ego constructing a wall and calling it freedom. This is the person who cuts people off without explanation, who goes cold overnight, who prides themselves on needing no one, who says, "I don't care," with a jaw so tight you can see the tension from across the room. This isn't detachment. It's dissociation wearing a mask. Jung was very clear about this. Anything you achieve unconsciously, without integrating it, without feeling it fully, will return. It will come back louder, more destructive, more insistent. Because the psyche does not allow you to skip steps. You cannot bypass grief and call it growth. You cannot armor yourself against vulnerability and call it strength. The shadow will find a way. It always does. So if you are detaching right now, ask yourself honestly, am I releasing this with my full heart, or am I shutting down because feeling is too frightening? The answer matters more than you think, because one path leads to individuation, the other leads to a colder, smaller version of yourself, and the world has enough of those already. Now, we enter the territory that Jung considered the deepest layer of the psyche. The place where detachment becomes not just a personal skill, but a spiritual reckoning. Jung wrote extensively about what he called the anima and the animus. In simple terms, the anima is the feminine aspect of a man's unconscious, and the animus is the masculine aspect of a woman's unconscious. But these are not just gender concepts. They are energetic realities, living presences within your psyche that shape how you relate to love, desire, connection, and yes, attachment. When a man falls deeply, almost obsessively in love, Jung would say he is often not in love with the woman herself, but with his own anima projected onto her. She becomes the carrier of his inner feminine, his sensitivity, his capacity for feeling, his connection to the soul. And because he has not developed these qualities within himself, he needs her to embody them for him. Without her, he feels hollow, cut off from life, emotionally dead. The same dynamic works in reverse. When a woman becomes consumed by a man, unable to function without his approval, unable to trust her own judgment unless he confirms it, she may be projecting her animus onto him. He becomes her inner authority, her confidence, her sense of direction. Without him, she feels lost, uncertain, voiceless. This is not love. This is psychic dependency disguised as love, and it is one of the deepest, most painful forms of attachment a human being can experience. Detachment from this level requires something extraordinary. It requires you to go inward and develop the very qualities you've been outsourcing. For the man, it means learning to feel, to access his own tenderness, his own intuition, without needing a woman to carry it for him. For the woman, it means finding her own voice, her own authority, her own power, without needing a man to validate it. This is staggeringly difficult work, because these projections often begin in childhood. They are woven into your earliest memories of love. They feel as natural as breathing. To withdraw them feels like dismantling something fundamental about who you are. But Jung would say, what you are dismantling is not yourself. It is the false structure that has been preventing you from becoming yourself. And on the other side of that dismantling is a wholeness that most people only ever glimpse. Let's pause here and talk about something practical, because all of this can feel abstract, and I want you to walk away with something you can actually use. How do you know when a projection is active? How do you catch it in real time? Jung gave us clues. The first sign is disproportionate emotion. If your reaction to someone is significantly larger than the situation warrants, a projection is almost certainly at work. Someone makes an offhand comment, and you feel devastated for days. Someone cancels plans, and you spiral into abandonment panic. Someone succeeds, and you feel a rage that makes no logical sense. The size of the reaction is your signal. It's telling you that the emotion doesn't belong entirely to this moment. Part of it is old. Part of it is coming from something unresolved in your own history. The second sign is idealization or demonization. When you cannot see a person as simply human, when they are either perfect or terrible, savior or villain, everything or nothing, you are in the grip of a projection. Real people are complex. They are flawed and kind, selfish and generous, all at once. If your image of someone is flat, if it lacks dimension, that image is not a perception. It is a projection. The third sign is repetition. If you find yourself in the same dynamic over and over, different person, same feeling, different name, same pain, then the issue is not with the people you're choosing. The issue is with the pattern you are projecting. You're casting the same role again and again, and the universe keeps sending auditions until you finally see what you're doing. When you catch a projection, you don't need to do anything dramatic. You don't need to confront anyone. You don't need to make a scene. You simply need to pause and ask, what part of me is this about? And then sit with whatever answer comes, even if it's uncomfortable, especially if it's uncomfortable, because that discomfort is the doorway. Every single time, there is a phase in this process that almost no one warned you about. And it's the phase that causes most people to abandon their detachment and go running back to their old patterns. Jung described it as the night sea journey. It's an ancient mythological motif that he recognized as a psychological reality. The hero is swallowed by a great creature, a whale, a dragon, a sea monster, and must travel through darkness before emerging transformed on the other side. In psychological terms, this is the depression, the confusion, the disorientation that often follows genuine detachment. You've pulled back your projections, you've released the attachments. You stopped merging with others, and now you're in the dark, alone with yourself in a way you've never been before. And it doesn't feel like growth, it feels like collapse. Your old identity is dying, and the new one hasn't formed yet. You're between worlds. The person you were, the one who needed approval, who measured themselves through others, who couldn't say no, that person is dissolving. But the person you're becoming hasn't fully arrived. This is the belly of the whale, and everything inside you will scream to escape it. Your mind will tell you that you made a mistake. Your body will crave the old familiar pain. Friends and family might look at you with concern and say, "You've changed, you're different. What happened to you?" And you won't have an answer, because you're in the middle of the transformation, and the middle has no words. Jung would tell you to stay in the dark, don't escape, don't self-medicate, don't reach for the nearest person and project all over again, because this darkness is not punishment, it is gestation. Something is forming inside you that cannot form in the light. something that needs the pressure of solitude to take shape. The night sea journey does not last forever, but it must be endured. And those who endure it, those who resist the urge to flee back to the surface, emerge with something rare, a self that is not built on other people, a self that is not dependent on reflection, a self that stands on its own foundation, rooted in its own depths. And that self, when it finally meets the world again, does not attach out of desperation. It connects out of choice, and that is a completely different thing. Now let's talk about what detachment looks like on the other side, because this is the part that surprises everyone. You might expect that someone who has truly detached would become distant, cold, isolated, a lone wolf moving through the world without connection, but the opposite happens. When you stop projecting, you start seeing. For the first time, you perceive other people as they actually are, not as carriers of your needs, not as screens for your fears, not as characters in your personal drama, but as real, complex, autonomous beings with their own shadows, their own wounds, their own beauty. And something extraordinary happens. Your compassion deepens. Not the desperate, codependent compassion that says, I need to fix you so I can feel okay. But a clear, steady compassion that says, I see you. I see your pain, and I can sit with you in it without losing myself. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of the self with a capital S. Not the ego, not the persona, not the collection of roles you play, but the deeper center of the psyche, the organizing principle that holds all the opposites together. Light and shadow, strength and vulnerability, connection and solitude. The self does not choose between these, it contains them all. And a person who has touched their own self, even briefly, even imperfectly, relates to the world in a fundamentally different way. They don't need you to be a certain way. They don't need you to complete them. They don't love you because of what you give them. They love you because they have found the source of love within themselves, and it overflows naturally toward others. This is not cold detachment. This is the warmest thing a human being can offer. Presence without agenda, love without conditions, connection without chains. And here's the paradox that Jung understood so deeply. You can only truly connect with others after you have truly separated from them. You can only love freely after you have faced the terror of standing alone. You can only give yourself fully after you have first gathered all the pieces of yourself back from the places where you scattered them. Detachment is not the opposite of love. It is the prerequisite for real love. And that is a truth that will rearrange your entire life once you let it in. There's something else that happens during this process, something subtle that creeps up on you before you fully recognize it. And it has to do with how you experience time. Before detachment, time is consumed by others. You spend hours thinking about what someone said, what they meant, what they think of you, what you should have said in return. Your mental energy is a satellite orbiting another person's planet. Days pass and you realize you haven't had a single thought that originated purely from within you. Every thought was a reaction, a response, a rehearsal of some conversation that already happened or hasn't happened yet. After detachment, something shifts. Time opens up. Not because you suddenly have more hours, but because your mental space is no longer occupied. The endless loops dissolve. The imaginary arguments stop. The obsessive analysis fades. And in its place, there is a stillness that feels almost eerie. You wake up in the morning and your first thought is not about them. It's about you, not in a narcissistic way, in a grounded, centered, I am here, in my body, in my life way. And it's disorienting at first because you're not used to this much inner quiet. You've been living in a storm for so long that calm weather feels wrong. But it's not wrong. It's what your psyche has been trying to reach all along. Every attachment, every projection, every cycle of merging and breaking, it was all your soul trying to find its way back to this, to itself, to the quiet, steady center that was always there beneath the noise. Jung called it the still point, the place where the opposites meet and rest, where you are neither chasing nor running, neither grasping nor rejecting, just here, fully here. And from this still point, you begin to notice things. You notice the quality of light in the room. You notice the taste of your coffee as if for the first time. You notice feelings in your body that you've been overriding for years, small pleasures, quiet joys, the sensation of being alive that you were too distracted to feel. This is not detachment from life. This is arrival into it. Before we close, I want to speak directly to you about something that might be weighing on you right now. Maybe you're in the middle of it. Maybe you're in the belly of the whale and it's dark and you don't know who you are anymore. Maybe you've started pulling back from people and it feels wrong, even though something deep inside you knows it's necessary. Maybe everyone around you thinks you've changed and they don't mean it as a compliment. I want you to hear this. You are not broken. You are not cold. You are not losing your capacity to love. You are in the most courageous phase of psychological development that a human being can enter. You are doing the one thing that most people avoid their entire lives. You are meeting yourself without a buffer, without a proxy, without someone else's face to look at, so you don't have to look at your own. And yes, it's frightening. Jung himself said that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, not partially, not the good parts, not the version of yourself that other people applaud, but the whole thing, the shadow, the wound, the weakness, the strange and unacceptable parts that you've been hiding behind projections and attachments for as long as you can remember. To accept all of that and to still stand, that is the work. That is the real detachment. Not from others, but from the false version of yourself that needed others to exist. And when that work is done, and it is never fully done, but when you have gone deep enough, something remarkable happens. You return to the world, you open the door again, you let people in, but now you let them into a house that is truly yours. Not a house built from their expectations, not a house furnished with their approval. Your house, yourself, solid, warm, lit from within. And the people who walk through that door now, they're not there because you need them. They're there because you chose them. And they chose you, not the projection of you, not the persona, not the mask, you. That is what waits on the other side of detachment. Not emptiness, not isolation, but the deepest, most honest, most unshakable connection you have ever known, first with yourself, and then from that fullness with the world. Jung spent his life mapping the territories of the unconscious, the shadow, the archetypes, the process of individuation. And through all of it, one truth runs like a thread. You must lose yourself to find yourself. You must release what is false to discover what is real. You must let go of the borrowed light so you can ignite your own. That is detachment. Not a wall, a door, one that opens inward. And if you're standing in front of it right now, hand trembling, not sure what's on the other side, here is what I would say. Walk through. The person on the other side is someone you've been waiting to meet your entire life. It's you.